Hey guys, I've been recording videos at night a lot. It's just the timings for me, so please don't mind the lack of natural light. You also get to see all my posters and everything in the background, so there's that. Um, but anyway, it's like 1 a.m., and in this video today, I want to talk about what makes for a good antagonist. In last video, I discussed what makes for a really strong protagonist, but antagonist is what adds challenge to the story, so they are just as important to your story, if not more. And sometimes we are so focused on really making our protagonist stand out that we forget to give depth to our antagonist. They need to be really solid in their own right, and they need to challenge our protagonist because they're the ones who are going to add tension to the story. So this time I'm gonna keep my intro short and sweet so as to not torture you guys with unnecessarily long yap. So today I'll discuss 5 things, narrowed it down to 5 things, cut off the fluff to keep it short and sweet. 5 things that if you just add to your antagonist, if you haven't already, that will really make them pop. And these are things that you might be able to add in the hook of the story itself. So let's get into it. So, villains don't need to be evil, they need to be understandable. The scariest antagonists generally believe that they're doing something right, and if it's not something right, at least it is justified. So, this brings us to the first point of carving the best antagonist: motive. A plain, flat villain is going to say something like, I'm doing it because I can. But a really scary antagonist will say something like, I'm doing it because no one else would. So let's come up with an example for that in a fantasy context. Let's say that you have this fantasy land where there's this magical forest which basically serves life. It serves life to your magical realm, and it's thriving. There's this forest priestess. She nurtures for this forest as if it is her own soul. She pours into it, she worships it, and she loves it. One day she finds out something really dark and twisted about it. She finds out that the only reason that this forest is able to give life is because every generation it consumes the life of an innocent child. So it's like all the magic and the life that the realm is getting is kind of like a blessing or a balance thing for the sacrifice. So she goes to the council and she tries to get them to stop it, but what do instead? They exile her. So she goes mad on her quest to burn this forest down. So she ends up practicing whatever is forbidden in that world, like dark alchemy, necromancy, or whatever, to burn this forest down. In her quest to burn this forest down, she kills a lot of innocent people. She's driven wild by her obsession to burn this forest down. Now, she thinks what she's doing is twisted, yet it is justified. And you know what? On some level, your reader will get that too. That what she is doing is indeed justified, even if it feels wrong, even if it's killing a lot of innocent people, and even if it has become something completely different from what it started out to be. That is what makes an antagonist really scary. A strong sense of motive, like a solid motive, which is so good to the point that your reader also is low key on board with it. Like, you know what? I get it. I understand. Like, you're fucked, but I get it. So that is the first thing. Your antagonist needs to have a strong motive, a strong reason, a strong justification. They need to really believe that what they're doing is for a good cause, that it's right. For example, Thanos. He caused a genocide, but he genuinely thought overpopulation was an issue, you know? So something of the sort. That is what makes an antagonist really terrifying. Now, a villain who causes random destruction is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But an antagonist that used to know you, love you, be you, that is devastating. This brings me to my second point: personal connection. To add some sort of history between your protagonist and antagonist makes the emotional stakes higher, which causes more tension. Let's take Darth Vader, for example, from Star Wars. His descent was personal to Obi-Wan. We used to be brothers, Anakin. That is a line that can still devastate viewers. So adding a personal connection can make the emotional stakes really high, even if it's something as short as maybe a brief friendship or a shared childhood, or maybe they fought a war together or something that gives them some history. Or you could also add another point where your protagonist accidentally created the villain. That makes it even scarier. Supernatural also does this really well, where, you know, two brothers basically who love each other, who would never hurt each other, end up, under threat of becoming vessels for two opposing forces. Sam could become a vessel for Lucifer, so Dean gets constantly thrown into situations where he has to deal with his own brother being possessed by Satan himself. So that makes the emotional blow even worse. And then Dean is a threat of being possessed by Michael, and then these two just fight each other off. It's just, it's a whole mess, right? So, personal stakes can make your antagonist even more scarier, even more personal, and it can make it even more entertaining for the reader, because your antagonist needs to give you nightmares, absolutely needs to give you nightmares. So the next important thing that I want to discuss is reflective themes. Now, I think this is done really well in Blades of Light and Shadow. Now, if you have played that RPG, you will realize that there is a light realm and there is a dark realm. So when I say reflective themes, I essentially mean like your villain is kind of like a darker version of your protagonist. It's kind of like two sides of the same coin, or yin and yang, that kind of thing going on. You realize that they're both right and they're both wrong in their own ways. For example, light magic in Blades of Light and Shadow is, initially we see it as something that is, good, and we automatically see dark magic as something bad, or the people in dark realm as bad. But in the future we end up visiting the dark realm and we realized, there's goodness there as well. But the problem is that light magic was driven by positive feelings, so we immediately assumed that it's good, whereas dark magic was driven by more aggressive feelings and could cause corruption. So the price for dark magic was corruption. Whoever used it would end up, eventually becoming corrupted and evil. And for light magic, it would take your life force and shorten your lifespan, so you would die. So what happens in the end is you realize that if light and dark magic are used together, they make something called neutral magic, which is invisible and which cuts the cost for using magic, because they were supposed to be used together all this time. So the whole war that happened between dark and light ends up becoming redundant. So reflective themes like this can really make your villain come off as something meaningful, not as just, plain evil, but something actually meaningful and worth observing and understanding. So it is very important, or I think it really makes your villain stand out if you add reflective themes to it, a whole yin and yang or two sides of the same coin kind of theme to your story. One thing I've noticed in every single fantasy book, show, whatever, is that people find the villain likable on some level. Even in non-fantasy, I've noticed that your villain needs to be charming. Your reader needs to actually like the villain and they need to hate themselves for it. So many good examples for this. If you have watched the series You, it's not a fantasy, I know. Joe Goldberg, people love him because, or look at Morgana in BBC's Merlin. She starts off as this pure, kind woman, but then life throws her so much misery that she ends up becoming evil. But we kind of saw it coming. So we don't hate her for it, and we hate ourselves for not hating her for it. So your villain you need to show them fall in love. You need to show their reasons, their drive, their conflict, their charm, to make your reader fall in love with them just as much as they're in love with your protagonist, which is going to make the struggle so much more intense. For example, we love the villains in Supernatural, right? Crowley or Rowena. They're not good people. We love them because they're charming. Sometimes we might hate ourselves for loving them, and we forgive the horrible things that they do because they're that charming. So you need to cause conflict in your reader because you have to make your villain so charming. And make their actions seem so intuitively justified. Your protagonist is flawed. You need to make sure your reader knows that. And your antagonist is not all evil. You need to make sure your reader understands that as well. So, complexity over chaos. That is the fourth point. Make your villain charming. Have your reader fall in love with your villain just as much as you want them to fall in love with your hero. Now I come to my last and most important point. Number 5. Give your villain influence and agency in your world. Don't just use them as this crux to make your protagonist look awesome or strong or to highlight their qualities. No. Like Voldemort, he's one of the best villains in fantasy. Why is he that good? He had so much influence in the Harry Potter world. He basically shaped Harry's life. So, give your villain influence. They shouldn't just randomly drop in chapter 35 to get into a fight to make your hero come off as this, super cool dude or whatever. Give your villain influence. Your villain needs to be a constant presence in the book, a constant looming threat. Their presence needs to be known, it needs to be felt. That is what makes for a good villain. That is what makes for good tension and chemistry. There should be chemistry between an antagonist and a protagonist. That's the whole point. That is what people love. So there should be chemistry, and there will be chemistry only when there is influence. Only when you give your villain influence. Give them their own strategies, their own presence, their own persona. Give them just as much importance as you would give a protagonist. Never sideline your antagonist. They are the star of your story. This concludes my 5 points about what makes for a good antagonist. And I hope this was helpful. I think this is the outro. I made sure to keep this video kind of short and not ramble a lot and be straight to the point. So if this helped you guys at all, let me know. And let me know if you want me to make more videos like this, or if there is something else that you want me to talk about. I would love to do that. I hope you have a great day ahead. I'm gonna go and caffeinate a lot more.